In the historic SCO Summit 2025 held in Tianjin, China, Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered one of the most significant speeches of his career, a speech that not only sent shockwaves across global diplomatic corridors but also defined the direction of future world politics, where he directly threatened NATO, expressed gratitude towards India and China, commented on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, and addressed the growing role of the United States and Donald Trump in shaping global affairs. Putin began his speech by underlining the importance of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as a bloc that symbolizes the rise of multipolarity in the world, rejecting the idea of a unipolar order dominated by the West, and firmly declared that the SCO was not only a regional security alliance but also an economic and cultural partnership that could reshape global geopolitics, stressing that Russia, India, and China together represented a massive share of the global economy, population, and defense strength, making them a natural counterbalance to the US-led NATO alliance. He thanked both India and China for their consistent cooperation with Russia in the face of Western sanctions, isolation attempts, and political propaganda, calling them true partners who stood firm during testing times, especially when the Ukraine crisis had pushed Russia into direct confrontation with the West, highlighting that while Western countries tried to cripple Russia economically, SCO members opened doors for trade, energy cooperation, and infrastructure projects, thereby keeping Russia alive and strong in the global system. Turning his focus towards NATO, Putin issued a sharp warning, claiming that NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe, its continued military support for Ukraine, and its constant presence in Asia-Pacific were provocative moves that threatened not only Russia but also the security of Eurasia as a whole, and he openly stated that if NATO did not halt its aggressive policies, Russia would have no choice but to respond with measures that would be asymmetric and unpredictable, which many analysts interpreted as a veiled threat of advanced weapon deployment or cyber and nuclear deterrence strategies, remarks that immediately grabbed global headlines. Putin also lashed out at the United States, accusing Washington of fueling global instability for its own interests, from orchestrating wars in the Middle East to destabilizing Eastern Europe, from controlling international financial systems through the dollar to exerting political influence in Asia-Pacific, and in this context, he referenced Donald Trump's political comeback in the U.S., arguing that Trump's return to American politics was a reflection of deep divisions within the United States, divisions that could affect the consistency of its foreign policy, noting that under Trump, the U.S. might retreat from some global commitments while doubling down on others, creating further unpredictability in global affairs. Shifting to Ukraine, Putin strongly defended Russia's military actions, arguing that the Ukraine conflict was not an act of aggression but an act of defense, designed to protect Russia's security from NATO's encroachment and to secure the rights of Russian-speaking populations in Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, reiterating that Russia would not surrender or negotiate under Western terms, and only a fair settlement respecting Russia's red lines could end the war, simultaneously accusing the Ukrainian government of being a puppet of Western powers who were using Ukraine as a battlefield to weaken Russia. In this part of his speech, Putin drew comparisons with historical invasions of Russia, reminding the audience that from Napoleon to Hitler, those who tried to encircle and weaken Russia ultimately failed, and he confidently declared that this time too, Russia would emerge stronger despite sanctions, isolation, and economic warfare. While addressing economic issues, Putin emphasized that the SCO could become an alternative to Western-dominated institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and even the dollar system, proposing the idea of a joint currency framework or at least greater reliance on local currencies in trade among SCO members, particularly Russia, China, and India, noting that this would protect the bloc from Western financial coercion and sanctions, while also boosting regional economic sovereignty, which was warmly welcomed by several member states. He also mentioned ongoing energy projects, oil and gas deals with India and China, and infrastructure plans that could link Eurasia through railways, pipelines, and digital networks, effectively presenting SCO as the new powerhouse of the global economy. Putin further spoke about cultural cooperation, student exchanges, technological partnerships, and defense exercises among SCO members, arguing that such collaboration would ensure long-term strategic stability and people-to-people connection among these nations, giving the SCO not only a military or economic identity but also a cultural and civilizational one, something the West could not easily break. In the second half of his speech, Putin became more aggressive in tone, describing NATO as a global destabilizer, and accusing it of interfering in sovereign nations under the pretext of democracy and human rights, citing examples of Libya, Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, where NATO interventions left destruction instead of peace, and he warned that such a model of global policing had no place in the modern multipolar world, asserting that countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America were waking up to resist Western dominance, and SCO could play a central role in leading this awakening. He also expressed solidarity with countries under sanctions and Western pressure, including Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, and others, declaring that Russia stood by all those who resisted unilateral Western dictates. Towards the conclusion of his speech, Putin turned back to India and China, expressing personal gratitude to their leaders for their balanced approach, for not bowing to Western pressure, and for choosing diplomacy and cooperation over confrontation, acknowledging that while India maintained strategic ties with the West, it also preserved its partnership with Russia, particularly in defense and energy, and China, being Russia's strongest ally, consistently opposed Western sanctions and expanded trade with Russia, making both nations critical to Russia's survival in the international arena. The speech ended with a call for unity among SCO nations, a rejection of Western hegemony, and a warning to NATO that any further aggression would meet with a firm Russian response, leaving the audience with a sense that the world was rapidly moving towards a multipolar order, where the US and NATO would no longer enjoy unchecked dominance, and countries like Russia, India, and China would play decisive roles in shaping the future. Analysts around the globe interpreted Putin's SCO Summit 2025 speech as a defining moment in international politics, a speech that combined threats, gratitude, and vision, a speech that reassured Russia's allies, warned its enemies, and positioned the SCO as a true alternative to Western alliances, signaling that the geopolitical chessboard of the 21st century had entered a new era where balance of power was shifting eastwards, and this single speech by Putin might be remembered as the turning point where multipolarity moved from theory to reality.